My guest again tonight is Dean Blundell, the legendary Canadian radio personality. He's best known for hosting the boundary-pushing morning show on 102.1 The Edge in Toronto from 2001 to 2014, and later on the Fan 590. He now hosts the Dean Blundell Show podcast, which falls under the Crime Media banner. His unfiltered and confrontational approach has always pushed the boundaries of Canadian broadcasting. And these days, he's taking on a much more serious issue: foreign interference in Canadian politics.
When you're done with sports radio, what else is there? You got to go and take on foreign interference.
Yeah, this is the obvious next step. What else are you going to do? You've done it all at that point. Take on the Russians. It's always a wise thing to do. Yeah. Russians, the Indians, the Chinese. And the nice thing about Canada is you get a smorgasbord of interference. It's not just like one country. It's everybody's all in.
It's such a good point you bring up to start, Zev. I don't know if people, and obviously foreign interference is top of mind everywhere. Russia's responsible for 80% of disinformation. They're literally trying to take over the world right now. What happened in Moldova the other day, Poland just basically said, hey, get all of you fucking people out of here. Lithuania, Estonia, Georgia, all those Eastern Bloc countries are having a major moment right now against Putin. And everybody's starting to realize, oh my God, Russia spent the last 40 years embedding themselves in Western democracies, and this is their moment. This is like the hunt for Red October shit almost at this point, right? It's these espionage type stories that, again, we talked about it on my podcast that you just didn't think existed. They're fucking all real and they're here. So I thought to myself, analytically, what is the fucking most important conversation to have right now? And it's this one. It's national security. It's safety and the comfort of individuals. So that's why we do what we do.
It's a long way off from Steve-O, which I read about your controversy with Steve-O way back when.
I missed that, though. I tell you what, I used to be what they would call a shock jock, right? So they used to pay us to be as outrageous as humanly possible. I've obviously changed the content and the color of what it is that we do. But, dude, this has been so funny to me on so many levels that you talk about bringing what you used to do into what you do now. I'm shocked by all of it. At the same time, I'm having a great time talking about it because everybody needs to know what's going on in their backyard.
Absolutely. You're 100% correct. Speaking of our backyard and from a broadcasting perspective, I noted that Tim Pool recently named in the DOJ indictment and also in other sort of documents about foreign interference. He's ending his show, part of his show. It was a very, very sad moment. We were complaining about not having a coffee bar or something.
We've gotten to a point in the company where everyone's kind of just kicked their feet up and said, I'm doing what I need to be doing. Yeah. And then that just means I'm Sisyphus pushing the rock up. The problem is people are sitting on the rock. We have this awesome property.
Because every YouTube star has a coffee bar, and cameras that work, and 2 studios, and his staff of 31 people.
31 people. How many people do you have on your podcast staff? How many people?
With 30 plus 1. It's me.
You had Tim Pool get outed by the DOJ working for Tenet Media, $10 million. Dude got $100,000 an episode, $400,000 a month to literally produce Russian-made content and to parrot Russian talking points. Lawrence Southern, Jack Posobiec, Dave Rubin, they were all named in this thing. So yesterday, Tim Pool goes, it's over. And his excuses, to your point, were so fucking funny to me. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Our secondary studio's too cold. Mm-hmm. A staff of 30, no one seems to know how to work here anymore.
Weekday sunsets was another one because everyone deserves that.
But this is the time. This is why we have done what we've done for the last 4 years. You're starting to see some of that schadenfreude come out.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. I must say it was a nice little moment. What amazes me is you've got the same list of people that I know that are absolutely 100% certain are Russian disinformation agents or assets, and they still get to do their work. They still go out there. They still get their funding directly in rubles, sometimes directly from the Russian embassy, and there's nothing stopping them. Nothing stopping them. I'm not sure what preempted Pool's decision yesterday, but I'm sure it had some DOJ overhangs regarding that decision. But mostly people can keep doing their interference and it's protected under the First Amendment.
You bring up another great point, Zev. You must be a professional broadcaster, a journalist. The note that came out this morning, Elon Musk has been talking to Vladimir Putin since 2022 on the daily.
As previously reported by Narativ and me.
Yes, thank you very much. And you comport that with Donald Trump's legendary criminal run, 34 felonies, running for president. No one seems to mind. Elon's giving away $1 million a day to people to get people to vote. That's illegal. He's evading sanctions, and he's aiding and abetting an enemy of the United States while having government contracts. I grew up thinking, people that do that go to jail, right? And then you come up here to Canada, and the wanton or willing criminality that is playing out in the Conservative Party of Canada with Pierre Poilievre today. And he had a bad week. This is like dollar store Trump up here in Canada.
Yeah.
Is, again, working with foreign agents to get the leadership bid of the Conservative Party. He did. Paying off whistleblowers. That happened. Working with foreign governments. That happened. Being associated with kill squads from foreign governments. That happened. It seems like these people, certain groups of people, fascists is what I see. Fascists like Musk, fascists like Trump, fascists like Pierre Poilievre, they understand they have a small window to commit serious crimes. And they're betting on being able to outrun those serious crimes because for the past several years, we've just allowed criminality to exist and run rampant. Right? Between Trump still fucking being a free man, Elon Musk working with every foreign government while having government contracts. And what I see up here in Canada with Pierre Poilievre, not having background clearance. And then yesterday mentioning, one of his people mentioned is, hey, listen, here's the reason why he's not getting it. Because this has been like a 2-year journey.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to get his NatSec background check just in case someone finds something sexual, familial, or political that they can use against him. And Elon Musk said it the other day, you want a window into criminality and it being just like an alternative way to win. Elon Musk said it the other day too, where he's like, if Kamala wins, I'm fucked. Yeah. So we live in this really interesting time where breaking the law on a fucking international level, it's a game to some people. And that's what's scary right now.
And in fact, the systems that have been built up both in Canada and the United States are hotbeds of corruption on both sides. It surely seems to me, or all sides, I should say, in Canada, there is a lot of corruption that's built into the system. People accept it as being the thing. So when something big happens, like the potential corruption of the leader of the opposition by a foreign state, they need to find special ways of saying all of this. Trudeau shows up at this parliamentary hearing because he can say it in question period, but under oath in these environments and make these kinds of statements unless you know something. So let's take a listen.
Because I am Prime Minister and privy to all these informations, I have the name of a number of parliamentarians, former parliamentarians and or candidates in the Conservative Party of Canada who are engaged or at high risk of, or for whom there is clear intelligence around foreign interference. And I have directed CSIS and others to try and inform the Conservative Party leader to be warned and armed to be able to make decisions that protect the integrity of that party, of its members from activities around foreign interference. And the decision by the leader of the Conservative Party to not get those classified briefings means that nobody in his party, nobody in a position of power knows the names of these individuals and can take appropriate action.
This is serious. It's about as serious as you can get, right? Talking about a attempt by foreign governments to flip the government in Canada, to subvert the votes of some of the parliamentarians, to have some parliamentarians elected in ridings that they have no business being elected in. It seems like in some of these ridings, there was a really aggressive push to eject the candidate who's most deserving of that position and replace him with somebody else. And so you might think, who cares? It's just like one parliamentarian, but it's not. It's a bunch of them. It's at least, as far as I can tell, a handful of conservatives and then even more liberals involved in all of this.
Yeah.
And yet, Mr. Poilievre does not want to do anything about it or hear about it.
Plausible deniability, Zev. Not only is it strange, it's strategically strange. It's to your point, and I'm glad you played that. That was the foreign interference inquiry that is being done by Justice Hogue. That happened a week ago, I believe, and it was a bombshell when the Prime Minister is on the stand under oath. And he's, I have a list. And what you didn't play there, which is fine, is him saying not only are there conservatives who are compromised, there were liberals and there were NDP. There was 3 major parties here in Canada. And he said the reason why we all have security clearances effectively is so that we can root this shit out in our party. Now, there's this movement on the conservative side to get him to release the names of every single person that's on said NSICOP list or compromised list. Now, the reason why conservatives are doing that is because nobody knows who in the Conservative Party, outside of people that have top secret clearance, who those people in the Conservative Party are that are working with Russia, India, China, other countries. And there were very specific examples that came out about 2 months ago in a report called the NSICOP report, which is the top secret summary of, without it's all redacted, that effectively said no uncertain terms that India helped mute one leadership candidate, which was Patrick Brown, in favor of Pierre Poilievre. And at the very last minute before Pierre Poilievre, who you just got a 13-point lead to become prime minister, it's fucking here, like it's happening. The reason why that is so important here is that India was just caught committing extrajudicial killings in a big fucking weird terror plot here in Canada that's like front page news across the world. And so now everybody's putting these things together. And for the past week, not only have people like me, and I believe we were the people who broke the story. We were 2 years ago when I tweeted that he didn't have his NatSec background check. We should start asking questions about why not. Now, everybody from the Prime Minister to Karina Gould to the Globe and Mail, now the media is asking questions. And this is the same media that's complicit in not asking the right questions for the past 2 years. But it's so big, it's so serious that people are starting to ask questions. It's in who's not saying what. And you know that's how this works in this space, right? Pierre Poilievre hasn't said a word about this. Conservatives, by and large, haven't said a word about this. This is the biggest story in Canada, the biggest story in the world, and it has everything to do with them being complicit in working with foreign governments against the interests of Canadians and Canada itself. And they still have yet to comment on it. But when you're talking about silence being an indicator of guilt, there is no other conclusion here. This is a gentleman named Michael Chong, who was asked to comment on why Pierre Poilievre, and keep in mind, this has been a 2-year hunt for people. Why don't you have your national security clearance? Because then I wouldn't be allowed to say what I want to say, which is entirely untrue. Why don't you have security clearance? Because that's a mug's game. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the business of the people. Deflect. So yesterday, Michael Chong, who's one of Pierre Poilievre's right-hand guys, who does have his top secret clearance, commented, finally, we found out why Pierre Poilievre doesn't have his national security clearance. And it is what we all thought it is. Let me read this to you. It's from the Globe and Mail. Michael Chong said there are numerous ways for the Prime Minister to reveal information about, obviously, people that are compromising the Conservative Party to Mr. Poilievre. Said, quote, security clearances involve a rigorous process that includes background checks on family members, credit and criminal checks, and an intrusive question about sexual partners or if they ever used drugs. The Conservatives fear any personal and family information obtained through this process would be used by the government for politically motivated purposes against Mr. Poilievre, following it up, saying, I don't trust this, Prime Minister. So effectively what Michael Chong is saying on behalf of Pierre Poilievre is Mr. Poilievre won't get his national security check because you're going to find some really gnarly shit in his past about his family and possibly sexual partners and relationships. And so we're afraid that the RCMP are going to weaponize that. This is an RCMP investigation. This is not a Liberal Party investigation. So is he effectively saying, I don't trust the RCMP. They're out to get me. They're going to use some information.
Why doesn't he just say we're guilty? Because basically it's the same thing. That's what it sounds like. You can blame everybody else for weaponizing shit. But at the end of the day, if you're actually doing the shit that you're alleged to be doing, then you're probably guilty.
Fucking unbelievable statement. I was like, wait a second. And this is the problem that we've had, is that now he's saying it, someone else is saying it for him. And it literally undermines everything that they've said and done to this point, and is the entire purpose of a national security background check.
Yeah, well, those pesky, intrusive questions. No one wants those things. And indeed, the media shouldn't be allowed to ask those questions either. That's their next step, of course, is to muzzle the media by asking the questions or exposing any of this. But you were so brilliant in tying all these things together a few minutes ago, because you were able to weave together the story about the Indians, which involves like widespread, like real violence, like death of people.
I learned it from Donald Trump.
We've just as well as, almost as well as Donald Trump, maybe better. It's like homicides, extortion. This is not like play violence, this, especially on a Canadian scale. This is like real violence. The Indians came here and did some business, and also some of the kind of business in the United States, it appears. The Indians are heavily involved. The Chinese are heavily involved. And you did leave out, maybe you didn't leave out, but you were going to maybe go there, is this role that Stephen Harper plays at the UDI? Is that what it's called?
IDU, International Democratic Union.
Former
Fascinating
Canadian
name
Prime Minister, right?
Yeah.
Who now,
Buddies with all the assholes.
who has, and I think Modi's party is or was part of this
BJP.
UDI.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's possible to suggest that maybe Mr. Harper is like the conduit of all of this activity, and maybe his organization there might have helped elect Mr. Poilievre using some Indian support instead of Mr. Brown. I mean, that's quite possible to imagine a scenario like that.
It's not only possible.
Yeah.
Forgive my Trumpian we. It's not like
You're excited.
possible. It is. There are very few solutions in my mind, or very few results when you really think about this, and you put it through a blender and you put some critical thought into it, and you create a ledger about are they or aren't they.
Mhm.
The conduit here from India to who Stephen Harper and Modi are best friends, by the way, along with Viktor Orban, best friends.
Mhm.
There's so many pictures of Stephen Harper and Modi, and it's like, this is my best friend,
Right.
Narendra Modi. This is like he stands up for conservative values. So the IDU is a collection of, for people that don't know, uber neoconservative politicians, business elites, and governments from around the world. And Stephen Harper, several years ago, decided that, hey, listen, I'm probably not going to make it through to the next government, so I need to get involved with an organization that commits terrible acts of discomfort in countries run by progressives.
Mhm.
So we want to turn the world into a conservative world that submits to the will of conservatism. Now, under that role of conservatism, you got Hindus, right? Hindu nationalists, Christian nationalists, Russian Orthodox, all the conservative dickhead religions.
The Israelis are involved in the idea.
Yeah, there's lots. You're
Yeah.
uber conservative, like the lack of a better term, that whole, and I don't know much about Zionism, but the hard right, authoritarian people in different governments
Yeah.
from around the world, they're all involved in Stephen Harper's IDU. And I find it hilarious because if you know anything about the IDU, they hate the World Economic Forum. Every single conservative is like that. They call themselves nationalists, and they're fighting against globalism. The IDU is a global, stochastic, domestic terror organization of conservatives who swap notes and say, this is the guy we want in that country. Here's a bunch of money. Send some money here. This is for a parade or a protest over there. Like the IDU was intricately involved in the farmer protest in, I believe it was in Holland, intricately involved in helping messaging in and amongst the people in J6, intricately involved in helping raise funds and awareness for the convoy that happened here that almost tore this country in two.
Mhm.
And to your point, that flow through, where did Pierre Poilievre rise to power? When? In our timeline in this country? It was at the convoy where they had flags made up, Pierre Poilievre for Prime Minister. At the time, Aaron O'Toole was the conservative leader. Within a month of that, he was gone. Pierre was now in charge, but he wasn't in charge until he got help from India. And everybody knew that he was going to lose because he is so unliked and he's despotic. And a gentleman named Patrick Brown was in the lead. All of a sudden, this woman comes out of nowhere named Debbie Jodwin. And she's like, Patrick Brown is a serial sexual.
I remember this.
And then Patrick Brown gets absolved of that. Shortly after he's absolved, he quits because he has to. Debbie gets $37,000 from the Conservative Party fund to pay her legal fees. Pierre admits to it. She's a brave Canadian. Where did they get that money? Who controls the Conservative fund? There's a lot of different people, but the person who's really in charge of that Conservative fund is a gentleman named Stephen Harper with the help of India. If you can find a different nexus to explain that, I'm all ears, because that's the only pipe that matters.
There's one very good potential pipe. There's also this guy, Arpan Khanna.
Arpan Khan, yeah.
Who's the Ontario co-chair for Poilievre, who not only hijacked his own, I think he's also a riding elected official. He's under investigation for potentially receiving support from the Indian government at around the time that he was backing Poilievre's attempt to become the leader of the Conservative Party. I don't know enough about what this guy's done, but there seems to be a thread there that directly ties the Indian government to the rise of Poilievre as leader of the Conservative Party. which I mean is stunning. It's just stunning that this guy was not meant to be the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. And because of some weird involvement, it seems to me like there's something there, obviously, that the Indian government is installing leaders of the Canadian political parties.
Yeah, they are. And not just that candidate. So Arpan Khan, London, Ontario, he was basically parachuted into that riding in favor of somebody else. And the allegation is, by the way, touching on something important, there are two very serious CSIS, RCMP, our version of the FBI, investigations into Mr. Khan. Very serious. And there is another very serious investigation into the Conservative Party of Canada and their involvement with India. So Mr. Khan was parachuted in because he was friendly with Modi. And if you know anything about India, there's Punjab, you've got Khalistanis, and you've got Hindus. And they're all very extreme. And Hindu nationalism, Modi brought it to the foray. It's a Hindu nationalist state in as much as Afghanistan, in as much as Iraq is a Muslim nationalist state. It's run by a religious asshole. It is legit, and extrajudicial killings are a thing. And so really why I find this kind of fascinating is Modi wanted this guy, Modi's team, the Indian diplomats that were just recently kicked out of Canada for these death squads, by the way. They're like, we need that guy there. And then they pulled someone else out. And by the way, this has happened several times already this year. But why this is interesting is this had nothing to do with who the best candidate was in that riding. It had everything to do with stacking the deck on behalf of India's interests. So this is a major investigation that is going on. And I got word that there's another investigation that was just started into membership ballot stuffing, if you will. Fake members, filling out fake membership cards so that Pierre Poilievre could actually get to the leadership. And that's the part that really drives a lot of people like me crazy up here. It's okay, listen. My grandfather landed on the beaches of North, like a lot of our grandparents. The stories and the sacrifices that people made. So your vote mattered, right? So when you went and filled out a ballot for what you thought was going to be a merit-filled election in any capacity, whether it's for leadership, whether it's for a candidate, whether it's for prime minister, whatever it is, that curried favor and you felt it was free and it was paid for by our ancestors dying on the fucking beaches of Normandy, among other places that we've sacrificed humanity for against fascism, against authority. And so now that conversation is starting to happen because the only thing the interest that I have in this subject is this country. It's democracy. It's the values and the virtues by which I grew up, shitting on those sacrifices by engineering a result that is not only not democratic, it's a lie. It is vote rigging. Yeah. It is vote fixing. It is treasonous. And that is where we're at now.
And you point out a really important thing that the actual election of the party leaders, especially in the Conservative Party, is really prone to ballot stuffing and fake ballots because it's not really a regulated thing. So it's whoever's got the most power and the most money can rig the system whatever they want. Now, it turns out that a lot of that money and power these days is coming from foreign sources. And therein lies the rub. We can't have Canada's democracy or America's democracy really run by foreign dictators who have a lot of money to throw around, but that's where we're at. And the other interesting thing, and we can close on this, is the idea that for China or for India, it doesn't really matter which party's in power. What really matters is that the party is not a majority government, especially with Trudeau. And that was certainly the intention there, was to keep him down to a minority government because it lessens his effectiveness around domestic issues, but also foreign issues. Like he just becomes less powerful. And the same thing with the United States, this idea of polarizing the United States to the point where it's just incapable of doing anything other than dealing with its own issues. And I think that's the thing that people are missing. It's not just that we have a foreign interference, but this foreign interference is designed to just completely leave us so shattered that it leaves us ineffective.
Shattered and isolated, right? I think how do you get people to not vote? You make them think it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. There's a huge through line of people that feel that way today. Like if people are going to be fucking with their lives, and why even bother? And I'm telling you right now, it has never been more important. We just got involved in a vote campaign. We want people to vote. And the more people to vote, and Canada is very apathetic. We've talked about this before. I think we got like a 40% return rate. It's bad. We should be countries that make it mandatory to vote, which the word mandatory in 2024 in Western countries, not a great word. But
you can make it easier for people.
You could make it a lot fucking easier. Like just do it on a couple weekends, maybe do it over a series of weekends, just make it super easy to fucking log on a secure thing, do some CAPTCHA maybe. I don't know. I know that this election is going to be very different this year. America votes in a couple weeks, right? And that's at a fever pitch. We're at a year. The sort of, and the bombs that are being thrown in the United States election now at this point are just incredible. But you're going to start seeing some results from some of these investigations prior to the election this year. And I think it's incumbent upon people that do what we do to remind people that, hey, listen, yes, this has always been a thing. Yes, where bad people exist, they'll always try and get a bad result. And that's especially true when it comes to politics and elitism and money and power, right? This is about a lot of fucking power in the United States and Canada, government contracts and all that stuff. Same thing up here in Canada. It's very similar. So it's life or death for a lot of businesses, a lot of people that have put years and years into getting guys like Pierre Poilievre elected. And so to start to see some accountability up here in Canada has really been incredible. And to see people having these open conversations about things that we weren't supposed to have conversations about. Is this guy a fucking traitor? Like, you never used to be able to tweet that stuff.
No.
It's commonplace now because we have traitors that are working with in Canada and the United States. Dude, we haven't talked about the States because we're talking about Canada. We have literal MPs, congressmen, senators, maybe former presidents who
Careers.
There's one. Go vote.
Vote and be very proactive about protecting the systems and protecting the borders on both sides. We can't have this sort of Pollyanna-ish honor system where everyone can arrive and just as long as they say they're doing everything according to the rule of law, they're okay. We really have to protect our systems. We have to protect our votes. We have to protect our democracies. And we need there to be thriving political parties that actually can rise to a majority and do really well. Because that's when democracy works best, is when it's not so divided. Congratulations for being involved in the vote drive. I think it's super important.
We're the people that ordered the fish. They brought us the chicken and we're like, we'll eat it.
Yeah, exactly. It looks good. We'll eat it anyhow. So tink you for being on the show again. It's the third time you've been on Narativ Canada.
I love talking to you. I had you on my show last week. I have this ability to do a real weave. You're one of the bright lights in this space. And so I really appreciate it. And I love your podcast too.
You know what we should do after this?
Hey, Zev, Dean, big fan. Huge fan.
And I'm a big fan of yours. And thank you for being a big fan of mine. So you're the only one, but thank you. You know what we should do after this show? Because it could be like one of these like trading places things. After I hear this right now, maybe I'll the interview you did with me and it'll be like a
great idea.
Turning the tables. So you become the host and I'll become the guest and it'll be your show and we can watch.
We'll do a little swap.
Try that.
Dude, then I'm going to steal your podcast and do the same thing. Just be us stealing each other's content.
It's not stealing. It's more like appreciating.
Borrowing.
It's a very high form of appreciation.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a good idea because it's good for everyone to get to know you from every perspective. So, and people need to find the Dean Blundell show because it is a terrific podcast. And in fact, you've scored some big guests lately. I learned so much from your show, which I feel sometimes like I've heard it all before, no offense, but in your show, there's always new stuff. There's always brand new information.
I get bored with the same shit, Zev. Like I see people that stand up there, politicians repeating the same thing over and over again, like Pierre Poilievre for 10 years, like 2 years in a row. He's like, axe the tax, pump the brakes, shit your pants, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We had Thomas Lukasik, who's the former deputy premier of Alberta, who's watching Danielle Smith, who's a total conspiracy theorist, turn that province into a shithole. Yeah. And he's just ringing the bell. So I called him this weekend. I'm like, I want all fresh shit. I want to know everything you have. I want you to just a big brain dump on how crazy that woman is.
Great. Yeah. It's great. Look, you're an iconic person in Canadian broadcasting because you're one of the few people who challenges the system and has challenged the system in every way. And this is just the beginning, I predict, a huge part of your career that has not yet been written. And I'm looking forward to witnessing some of it as you continue to expose the stuff. You're the only person in Canada I can see who's actually doing the work to really expose all the stuff. The other journalists are beginning to pick up on some of it, but really, you're ahead of your time.
Thank you. Please never call me a journalist, by the way.
Legend in his own time.
Okay, I'll take that one.
Take a legend. Legend's pretty good.
One day, you'll tell the story of autocrats, crooks, and kings who came for our freedom. A story of citizens who stood up to tyranny and won. The people prevailed. and renewed an old vow to a more perfect union. And that was just the beginning. The story continues. Narativ, where truth lives.